All right, thank you all for coming. It's right at 3 o'clock Eastern time, and this is Thursday, May 28th, and this is a Panda Consulting workshop called Deep Dive, and today's topic is arcade expression language. And we've got several people here. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm sort of the moderator. I'm the one that talks a lot, but I'm going to try not to talk as much this time. I am muting everybody except for a couple people here. Sorry for that. Okay, and so Chris is here also. Chris, you want to introduce yourself? And
Sure. I'm Frank's son. I've been with Panda Consulting for about 3 years now. I'm going to be moderating the webinar here. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and I'll relay those to Frank. And we'll get a lot of information shared with everybody. I personally don't have a whole lot of experience with arcade, as I was just telling Ned, but this should be a very interesting session.
yeah. Yeah. So also today we're going to have, and we're very lucky to have, Ned Cake with Tallahassee Leon County GIS. Ned, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, all right? Because I know I wouldn't do justice to it. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ned Cake. Like Frank mentioned, I'm with Tallahassee Leon County GIS. I've worked in and around local government in Leon County for the past 24, almost 25 years now. Most of that working with GIS in some way or another. For the last 14 years, I've been just in GIS, working on GIS projects for Tallahassee Leon County GIS. Before that, I was a planner and an addressing coordinator and wore several other hats in county government. So I'm well versed in zoning and addressing and all sorts of other land use things. This is important, I don't consider myself a programmer. I dabble in programming, and when you see some of the arcade expressions that I'll be showing, know that every one of them took research. I didn't just sit there and stamp out code because I understood the logic so well. You really have to roll up your sleeves and dig around until you find what you're looking for. One of my good friends, Dan, is on this call. I often wander into his office when I'm having trouble and say, what do you think of this bit of code? Until we get something that works. So if I can't answer a question right away, I'll do my best to circle back around later and answer if I can. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Ned. And I've known Ned for a long time, and we were talking beforehand, longer than either of us cares to remember. But Ned is a great teacher, even though he may not acknowledge that. He's a great teacher, and I've been in some great workshops with him. If you ever get an opportunity, because he does a lot of workshops at the Seven Hills Regional User Group, please attend his workshops. They are great. I've learned a great deal from them. So I'm also trying to talk Ned, and I'll plant the seed. I'm trying to talk Ned into coming back and doing a deep dive on story maps. He's done some amazing story maps, and so you'll see some of them later, but hopefully we can do that also. So again, no slides. There's no slides in here. We're not going to sit here and just talk to you. We'll give you some introduction, and then we'll start exploring things with you. We need you to ask questions. So in order to ask those questions, just go ahead and type them out in the chat window, and Chris will go and make sure that we're aware of them and that we answer these questions as we're going along. All right, so let's start. So what then is arcade? I was doing some research and I realized that the first time I had ever seen arcade was on an Esri blog. Someone had gone and mentioned arcade in 2016, 4 years ago. Didn't learn a whole lot about it in the beginning, but the last 2 years or so, it really has grown into its own. So it is, if you look at the way Esri talks about it, they talk about it that in fact it's an expression language. Well, It's so much more than that, but the key to it is it's a language in which you can write these scripts or functions or expressions, and they can be applied all the way across Esri's current software line as it relates to the new technologies. They do not work in ArcMap. They do not work in ArcMap. And you'll see some variations on how much of that functionality is in each of them, but just know that Arcade works on all of Esri's products. And once you develop for one, there's just little tweaks here or there that you have to go and do. But it's amazing the depth of what you can actually do with this. So what I wanted to do is just sort of get you started by looking at some of this background information. If you're not familiar with Arcade, it really is just a scripting language, and Esri has some really great uh, listings up here to help you with it, including just a general description. What does it look like? What about, what sort of Boolean operators are there? How do you write comments inside of script or inside of Arcade? And what about multi-line statements and variables? Variables are always a big thing when you're writing. How do you declare the variable? How do you define it? Does it require that you actually tell it what type it is for everything or what? Variables in here, you can just declare the variable and then you don't have to assign it to a specific type. And the thing that I found unique is that once you declare a variable, you can change what it's storing. It can store a string, and then it can store a number, and then so the variables don't have to be typed, and they can store just about anything in them. There are some global variables in here, and these are sort of ones that you want to kind of know about. So for example, Ned later is going to show us some intersects, and it depends upon where you implement it as far as how you reference it. So for example, the intersects that Ned's going to show us actually are referencing layers inside of a map. So when he goes and declares that intersect function, he has to say it's in a map. Whereas some of the things that we do are actually in data sets that we work with in ArcGIS Pro. So we just have to declare it, oh no, this is inside of a data store, inside of our data set there. So just be aware of this. And again, I love the way Esri has documented this. I wish it was a little bit better, but overall, I'm happy with this. How to handle if statements on here. This is actually very good. For loops, the various operands. What do these things do? The plus sign actually depends on whether you're going and dealing with numbers or strings. It basically adds the two numbers, or it cats the strings together, concatenates the strings, and it tells you what each of the operands are that you have available to you. Sort of incremental, how you can manage your incremental pointers, comparisons. Really good material here. So to find it, you basically can just go to developers.arcgis.com/arcade and find these pages. The functions, they basically will show you all the different functions, both for data functions and date functions and geometry functions, logical functions, mathematical and text functions. So you can see the types of things that you can do. You can cat things together. You get lowercase, left, mid, proper, replace, right, split, trim, upper. And these are the same sort of functions that you see often, for example, VB script. We had the same sort of functions in there. But with Arcade, there is so much more. All the geometry functions and such in here. So do we have any questions on this before we just sort of start showing how and what you can do with Arcade? I'm going to start off and show you some of the things in Pro, and I'm going to try to end as quickly as possible so that we can then go and let Ned take over. By the way, I do want to mention this here. There is only one book that I've found that I consider a fairly good introduction to Arcade, and that's Writing Arcade Expressions for ArcGIS Pro by David Allen. It was, a little bit more than a year ago, and it's paperback. Unfortunately, it is not in digital, which I would love. And I actually have asked the author to go and publish it out in digital, but there isn't anything right now. This is actually a nice stock, a nice book to have in your library. Matter of fact, I bought it for all of our Panda team members, and I sent it to all of them, so they all have a copy of it. Not a great reference, but a good introduction. Ned, have you seen this yet, or do you use this at all?
I think I have a copy of it. Scott bought it for me. Thanks,
There
Scott.
you go. Yeah, it's a good introduction. I've gone back and read it a couple times, but if you want to look something up, it's tough to look things up because it is paper, and the index leaves quite a bit to be desired. So with that, I'm now showing an ArcGIS parcel fabric data set. This could be any sort of data set in here. And I just want to show sort of some of the things that you can do with Arcade. So if I open up the attribute table here, all right, I can look at, I've got a feature here I've selected. I can go in here and I can say, okay, so what can I do with this? One of the things that I've actually sent an idea on with ArcGIS Pro is the fact that right now, when you do calculate field, it actually defaults to Python 3. And I would like them to default it to Arcade instead, or at least give us the choice to set it somewhere in the options. Currently with 2.5, and I haven't seen that in 2.6 yet, they don't let you do that. Anyway, I would love to do this. So right now I'm going to calculate what the value is of this one selected record here from here. And so one of the things I want to do is I would just want to point out when I go and say, well, let's just go and let's go back here, sorry, and take the value that's in this field here. Remember, we talked about the global variables. In fact, this $ feature means take the feature that's currently selected, and then it's got a dot afterwards, and it says, okay, take the values that are stored in the parcel ID _ no fields and put it in there. So it's a reference to that individual property. And I can say, go ahead and run this, and it will take that value and store it over in the other attribute field for me. All right, no big deal. It's, quite a bit in there, but I could go in there and it can be used in calculations on here. One of the things that we like about this is that it allows you to dig down to the individual properties of that individual feature. So I can go and say, for example, with Arcade, that I would like for you to go and show me the area. Let me type it out here. The area of the feature dot the area of the feature in acres. All right. Take this down a little bit, just visualize. Of course, I did it wrong. That's not it. That's it. All right. So go look at that feature, take the area properties of it in acres and store it here. And it should go and store it here. But it also has some predefined elements in here. Let's go back here again. And I know I could do this. and say, instead of taking acres, you give it to me in square feet, and it will go and give me that value in square feet. So a lot of the things that we used to do, both with Python and VB, is we used to have to calculate and know what those individual constants were to switch things, switch the area property from square feet to acres. That's all built in to Arcade, so we don't have to deal with that at all on here. So the calculation element, once you understand the VB scripting language, or excuse me, once you understand the Arcade language, you can begin doing things like doing string manipulation and calculations and all sorts of things. I mean, I personally have not had any real limitation that I found on here yet. Ned, do you have anything on this at all? Anything you found?
No, not yet.
Yeah. So any questions on the calculation element in here? Thank you, Brian. Brian also just mentioned that one of the things that you can do is you can take this and you can export it out. Again, you can export out and actually create a set of calculation expressions on here that you can go and pull back and utilize quite a bit. And we find ourselves, as you can see, I wind up having a whole set of standard calculations that I'll be using all the time. But you can also go and use Arcade, not just on calculations of attribute fields, but you could also use them on labels. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to a label expression and look and see at the label properties of the lines, in which it's actually calculating the dimensions on here. And this is an Arcade expression. This is not a simple one. I've actually gone and copied it out, but this is Arcade again. And it's just a simple Arcade expression in which they're actually taking the properties of a line and calculating the bearing of that line in quadrant bearings. They're calculating the distance of the line. If it's a curved elements, they're calculating what the arc length is, what the chord length is. They're calculating a whole bunch of different things, and they are symbolizing them on here. So again, these are a bunch of flags in here, but down in here you can see that some of the things that it's doing is it's not just calculating it, it's setting colors so that as these things go through, it's automatically go and calculating and setting the variables for it, for the labels that are being produced. If you're interested in seeing the syntax of Arcade, here's a good example of this. So Ned, Jacob just asked on there, can you embed an Arcade expression in a Python script? Intuitively, I think you cannot. Have you got any experience with that, Ned?
I haven't seen that done, but Dan might know.
Can we turn
He's our Python leader.
So Dan, I'm turning your mic back on. All right, let's see here. I sent a request to you.
Frank, just so you're aware, your map isn't aligned correctly the way that you're sharing it. Half of it's cut off.
Go the other way.
Yeah, to the right.
There you go.
Interesting, because on mine it looks like it's fine. So let's try this instead. Let's make it smaller.
When you move it up into that corner, you cut a portion of it off.
Into which corner? The upper right corner?
The upper left corner.
Okay, so I'll move it away from that upper left corner. Like that?
Yep, and scoot it toward the center of the screen now. There you go, perfect. Now we
Okay.
can see the whole thing.
Okay, so yeah, it's interesting. It must be GoToMeeting doing something on that, because there's nothing over there that prevents that. All right, so the question then is, is can you embed an arcade expression in a Python script? So Dan, can you talk, or do you want to try to answer that in
Yes.
chat? Or
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I can answer that. Currently, if you're using desktop Python, you cannot, because this has to be interpreted by the Python interpreter. Now, maybe in the future, Esri has developed ArcGIS for Python. It works a little bit differently than native Python, and maybe Arcade will be embedded there, because in that tool set, you're working with the platform, and it is ESRI's goal to have Arcade verbose throughout the platform. So it doesn't matter if you're working with ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS for Enterprise. Arcade is there and available, and maybe they would make a tool set to have in that Python package.
Yeah.
Just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I thought that there was not an arcade library for Python yet. I thought it still has to be interpreted through the program. So I didn't think there'd be any sort of way to embed it in there unless you included that library. But yep. All right. So going through here again, within this, Python allows you not just to go and calculate specific variables for what the label says, but also you can do symbology on here. You can at least do coloring of, in fact, the number formats, and these are the standard types of formatting tags that are available inside your labels. So it is pretty interesting what you can do with this, and sort of to illustrate how this works. If I go in here and just select a line, all right, select this line, and if I go in delete out this, you will see that suddenly it becomes pink instead of the blue that it was before. But if I go and embed a bearing in there, it then becomes blue again. So it's doing all sorts of things in here with this arcade script in here. All right, it is pretty interesting what you can do with that. So in addition to that, though, again, just sort of to illustrate the different ways that once you begin understanding arcade, the different ways that you can begin using it. Another thing that we'll do is we'll often go and inside of ArcGIS Pro, we will enable some attribute rules, and attribute rules use arcade, so that in fact on this layer itself, I do have an attribute rule that says that I want you to calculate the calculated area field using that area calculation that I had. And I want you to go and run this attribute rule anytime there's a new feature created or at any time it's updated, and actually run that, so that anytime I do that, for example, over here, I will go and go here. Let's do it this way. It's easier. I know where these are. I will go in here to a tax parcel polygon, and I will create that. And when I look at it, I will see that it's already calculated that on there for me. So it's just an easier way that you can go and have it automatically do certain elements on here. Other rules that we have right now, this rule has been disabled, but this would automatically take any value that I put in the name field here and automatically copy it over to the tax ID field on here. For example, we'll also do some formatting in which we can have automatic rules pop up that once you put a field or put a value in the name field, it will go and take that, or subsequently it will take the parcel ID field and add elements in there and put them all together. So again, arcade can be used throughout this entire element on here. And we use it quite a bit on here. Any questions yet? Go ahead. No, okay. All right.
Quick
So
question. So those rules, where do they reside? Are they with the feature class you're working on, or will that work globally with anything that works with it until you know, change it or get rid of it?
So those rules, in essence, you can think of attribute rules as being sort of the successor to the attribute assistant. The difference is the attribute rules, not just the attribute rules, but in fact, let's go on these again. The attributes consists of 3 different types of rules. There's calculation rules in which it will go in and automatically perform those calculations. There's constraint rules which allow you to say that if this isn't met, don't do this. And then it throws off an error. And then there's validation rules which will go and validate and make sure that certain things occur before you're allowed to do it. These rules all reside in the geodatabase. They don't reside in external files. They reside in the geodatabase. However, that doesn't mean that you can take this and pop it up to ArcGIS Online, because ArcGIS Online still doesn't know how to handle attribute rules. Eventually it might, but right now it does not. But if you were to go and publish these services on web services, on a portal, it goes and utilizes and goes and maintains these attribute rules. Yes. So that if I create a set of attribute rules for my parcel fabric, and I then go and publish it on web services, the attribute rules that I put in there and I publish, they in fact are active, and they will be tested and they'll be validated, and they'll do all the calculations as my users are editing on using web services. Even if they're using branch versioning or whatever, those rules will still be taken.
Frank Nancy wants to know, can the arcade expressions be passed from one geodatabase to another?
Wow, Nancy, that's a good question. Meaning, can I take them and export them out and save them? I'm assuming that's what you're saying. I don't know. I don't know. Ned, have you had any experience with that yet?
No, I have not. So majority of mine is web-based.
Yeah.
Just now starting to get into ArcGIS Pro and using Arcade.
Yeah.
I've used it for calculating values, like simple values like you've done, but not for attribute rules.
We could have some core attribution checking, for example. I'm not sure how portable they are. I know that you can copy and paste and you can export them out. We do that all the time, but I don't know if there's any functions right now where you can take a set of attribute rules and copy them from one and paste them in another. It's interesting. It might be, you might be able to do that. I don't know. I don't know the answer. Can the code be compiled? As far as I know, it cannot. Yeah, as far as I know, it cannot be compiled. It is in fact just executed because it needs a trigger here, and it's executed with that. So there is no, yeah, it is not in fact compiled, or cannot be compiled in there. All right. Let me see, what else are we doing? I was going to do something with intersects, but I think I'm going to let Ned talk about the intersection capabilities on here. And I think I'll stop here. Ned, if you don't mind, I think I'm going to let you become the presenter now, because I think that's going to garner a whole bunch more questions on here. So I'll let you be the presenter and go from here. All right, can everybody see?
The right screen. Hoping everybody can see my screen now. So first, a little bit about TLCGIS and our web environment. My role is to is to take all of the awesome work that our GIS professionals do, package it up, and get it onto the web in a presentable fashion for the public and for our end users. And so that's really my primary role. What I've got here is an example of one of our applications. This is launchable from our property appraiser's website. If you go there and find your parcel, there's a whole list of maps that display as links, and the application will respond to a URL parameter for your property's tax ID number, and it will launch the application, find your parcel, and it will return, this is the natural features map, it will return a slew of natural features information on your parcel. And all of these values are coming from an intersect arcade expression, separate ones for each different field there. So to me, the challenge is to make parcels more than just about property, because we all know that parcels and addresses and streets are where GIS begins for most government. And if you can find the property, or if you can find the location, finding out everything about it that you can, it is the goal. And it's what we want to provide to our customers. So in the next, this is a story map, a GIS story map. I wanted to talk a little bit about how all this works and how it all goes together. So what you see here are the top 4 layers in this web map. That's what you're looking at, is a web map, are different versions of the parcel layer for Tallahassee, Leon County GIS. We get that parcel layer from the property appraiser. We publish it on our ArcGIS servers. It's updated every day. And it is registered in ArcGIS Online. And by registering it in ArcGIS Online, you're making a JSON page for it in ArcGIS Online. And within that JSON in the background, you're able to store this arcade content and these arcade expressions. And so for each of these, it's a different set of JSON in the background that's running. In this instance, the arcade is saved in the actual web map itself, but I can also save it in the registered feature layer. So let's start with this one. Everybody knows this is just the default parcel information. Object ID is displayed, which is a big no-no for WebGIS. Public doesn't care what an object ID is and would not understand it. Then lots of field names that may or may not make sense to an end user, and lots of content that may or may not make sense to an end user.
No formatting or anything on there.
No formatting or anything, nothing. So that's just how it starts. Then you can do a little bit better. You can go in and you can put in aliases for all the field names and maybe limit what you're going to display. So this is not an actual property appraiser application. It really just wants to give information about just the basic information about this property, not sales information. You notice here though that we still got some information like tax district and property use. What does 0100 mean? Most property appraisers know that that means single family residence. And the local government folks know that tax district 2 means Leon County and not city of Tallahassee, but it doesn't really mean anything to the public. So moving on down to the next one here. We've done a little bit better job. We've formatted it some. And I thought I'd take you through and also show you in the background what this looks like. So to get to this, you're just going to configure pop-up. And you can see here, it's really simple just to put those in place. I imagine a lot of you have already done this kind of work. So continuing on to the next one. This is the one I call Parcel Awesome, because this is the one that gives, turn that off. That gives all the intersect capabilities with the other layers. And one of the things you'll notice here is that it's doing a lot of analysis, so it's taken a second to draw, but really it just ran, I want to say 39 arcade expressions, and it took about a second and a half. And it's returned all of this information, from soil types to whether it's karst, whether there are wetlands, water bodies, and water courses on site, if there are any special regulatory layers. Here it's identified 3 drainage easements on the property. And what you'll notice is, this is one of the things I like the best about this is that none of those layers are actually turned on in the map. And if I'm using Web App Builder, I don't even have to have them visible in the table of contents. I can put an invisible layer in, and I can run an intersect against it and ask it questions.
So
provide the information in a pop-up.
Dave, one quick question. Mark has asked, does Arcade and the use of Arcade on ArcGIS Online use any ArcGIS Online credits to do that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of either. With ArcGIS
No.
Online, primarily you're using for either storage or for creating tiles or other new features in there, but not just to create a map and use, to go and query things off of that map. None that I'm afraid of. Or not that I'm aware of.
Not only that, but this registered parcel layer comes from our REST service back at TLCGIS. It's registered in ArcGIS Online, and it costs us absolutely nothing in credits to register this as a feature layer or as a map service or image layer.
Yeah.
And it's just content that's out there that we're able to add to any application, and we control how it looks to the end user because they're adding something that we have already developed pop-ups for.
So then you just led into another question. Nancy's asking, well, why do you have to register? What is registering going to get you?
Registering, it gets me that JSON page for the feature layer. I can put it in a web map, and the web map also contains JSON that I can sync an Arcade expression into. And if I'm doing intersect, it has to be in the web map because it's calling features from the stack.
Yeah.
But registering it is really how you get the Arcade interaction. So you're either going to be in a web map that is registered, or you're going to be a combination of feature layers or map services that are registered.
So in order to do the intersect, you need to be able to know what the Windows unique ID of that REST point is in order to be able to do that intersect, correct?
Actually, the map knows that. So
yeah.
let me show you this. Yeah. So let's go look at this. I'm going to do configure pop-up here, and then we'll do subdivision name expression. So here's what I've told it. So I've told it to go find a feature called subdivision in the stack. And that's what that is. And I'll apologize that the window is small here. So in the stack of this web map, there is a feature, there's a layer called subdivision boundaries. It has to be a feature layer. It cannot be a map service layer if you're going to run Arcade against it. And because there's often misalignment between our parcels and subdivision boundaries, I'm going to run a 10-foot negative buffer to get just a 10-foot inside of the parcel. It keeps me from having problems with slivers and things like that. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, give me a count of how many subdivisions I intersect. If the count is greater than 1, I'm sorry, if the count is less than 1, this is an acreage parcel, it's not in a subdivision. If the otherwise, it is in a subdivision, and return the intersect layer that we declared up here. And from the feature, grab the name of the subdivision, put it in the output expression that we declared here as a variable, and change it to proper case, because I don't want all caps. And then output the expression. And then when I've done this, I can hit test. There we go. Come on now. There we go. So you can see there that I'll get Killearn Lakes. Whatever random parcel it picked out of the stack, it did the intersect and it returned Killearn Lakes as a subdivision name. So it did the else part instead of the if part. So one of the things I mentioned before was that, you know, when you're developing these pop-ups, you're going to develop them in HTML if you want to do a nice job with the gray banding and things like that. And I would never, ever encourage you to try to write HTML in the little window that Esri provides. I think it gets better in the new web map functionality, but wouldn't try to do it there. I use an IDE called Aptana. There are lots out there. That's just the one I choose because it does a real job, nice job of playing the results in another window. So this is actually the pop-up that you're looking at, a picture of it. And you can see here that the expressions that I'm returning. So there, I put all the owners in one field, put all the addresses in one field, I put the legal descriptions all in one field, and you can see them here. Down here where you get significant grades, if they're not present, I want green text. If they are present, I want red text because I want them to highlight. So I do two expressions, one if it's true, one if it's false. Let's go back to that.
Ned, can you go ahead and tell us again the name of that IDE that you're using?
Aptana. A-P-T-A-N-A. I've also used VS Code before. Notepad++, I don't like it as much because it doesn't have that play option like Aptana does. It's really nice to be able to just make changes, hit play, make changes, hit play, and this thing will just continuously show you what your pop-up output is going to look like.
It's a nice looking IDE.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Let's see. So here are a couple of functions that I like. And I thought I'd start with this. So decode, and I have to thank my friend Dan. He showed me decode once, and then I decided I would just use it for everything. I may have gone a little too far with it. I'll confess to that now, but it has some really nice functionality. So basically what it enables you to do is if the attribute equals this, display this value. So in this instance, let's look at these. These are water quality locations. These are sampling locations. And if I click on this guy right here, you can see that I get this lovely image that pops up. Now in the background, there is an engineer, stormwater engineer over at the Public Works Department who's updating a feature layer on ArcGIS Online, and for water quality, he's putting in a single number value. And I think it is, the value is 5, and that is mediocre quality or mediocre health. And so when I look at this guy, let's go to water resource points, configure the pop-up, and look at the health expression. So $ feature, we know that means this feature that I've selected. And that means that this can be stored with the feature class too, because it's not depending on an intersect. And right here are the URLs for all of the meter graphics. And what I'm telling it is, if the response is 1, use meter 1, and there's the variable for meter 1, and it goes out and finds that image and puts it in the pop-up. So just like that, I'm telling it to put a nice picture in there, and the picture is based on an attribute value. That's really, first time I did that, I was like, wow, that's really trick. And now, you know, the engineers over at Stormwater are just busy updating those water quality values, and the meter is always right because it knows which one to use. Let's also look at prop use code. So before, when we were looking at the prop use code here in Parcel Starter, where is that? Somewhere down here. There it is, 0100. What does that really mean to anybody? Doesn't mean much of anything. But when we go down to Parcels Awesome, looks like my service has slowed down. There we go. Down here, we can see that the assessed value is single family residential. And what my decode is doing is it's got a ton of variables, and every time it runs into a value, it knows what to replace that value with in the pop-up. So when we go and look at it, and this is where I may have gone a little overboard, but you be the judge. Let's look at appraised use. So you can see here, I've got a variable for every single one. But that means that if I wanted it to say Mickey Mouse, or I wanted it to be a link, or if I wanted it to be anything else, all I have to do is set all the variables and set the decode values. And then I'm not noted if it doesn't equal anything. Because there are a few out there where they haven't put a value in. And just like that, no matter where I click, if I click over here, I get churches, I get public county school. And so just like that, what the public would consider probably a not so smart value, and that you would need metadata to figure out what it is, I've given them something they can understand it and consume quickly.
So now let me make a comment and point something out here. By the way, this is genius, and it's a whole lot of work. I can tell that you've done that. But one of the things when you first start configuring these, you have to realize that in fact there's within ArcGIS Online and Web Maps, that the expressions, the attribute expressions, are actually stored separately than the pop-up. That the expressions are stored in the next section down below, and then they're referenced when you're going and doing the pop-up in there. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out so that everyone's aware of that you don't store that arcade expression in the pop-up. You just reference it and use the results of that expression. Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I wanted to display something else here also. Let's go cancel out of this, and then let's look at the table for this. And if I can do this right, collapse this. Well, it's going to try to show all of them, but if you look down here at the end, you'll see that all the arcade expressions are piling up down here at the end of this, and they are actually available as, they appear as almost as attributes in the table. So there's all of them just stacked out. And I shouldn't try to do that on a parcel layer. Sorry. There, it eventually got to all of them.
Yeah. So does
there they all are.
Does that automatically do that?
Yes, it does.
Wow, I never realized that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's you can see that it's doing, okay, I'm not going to show you this, but if you click, I'll check this one and tell you what to do with it. But if it's a real simple layer, it'll just figure them all out for you. I also wanted to show this one, and this is kind of trick. So if you're looking at our easement layer, let me go down here and turn on the easement layer. Where are you? Should say environmental easements. I'm sure I just passed it. There we are.
Yep.
Okay, this is a subset of our easement layer that's just for environmental easements. And if I click on this guy right here, you'll see it comes back with some simple information, but it also will launch to our clerk site and show you. I don't know if you can see this. Hopefully it moved the screen over.
Yes.
It will actually show you. It will actually show you the recording for that easement. And the problem with that is it treats plat book and OR book and page searches differently. So I have to build a link. You look at this one at the bottom left there. At the very end, it says equals PB, but also say equals OR. And I have no way of knowing what it's going to be. So imagine me trying to build a link out, not knowing, you know, everyone could be different. So it's based on whatever that individual one is. So if we go in here into easements, configure pop-up, and then I do expression on this, I tell it, if it equals plat book, give it PV. If it equals official record, give it OR. And if it equals deed book, give it D. And that way it knows how to do the search. Before, I couldn't send any kind of search. I had to put multiple links in there and tell them, you figure it out. If it's a deed, click this link. If it's an OR, click this link. Now I don't have to do that. The layer is smart enough to tell, or the decode is smart enough to tell the link what to use.
So Ned, Spencer has a question on here, and this is a good question. Is there an advantage to using an arcade expression rather than establishing a domain in the assessed use type example?
All right, so there's not. But remember that I don't own that layer. I work for Tallahassee Leon County GIS and not the property appraiser. And that's their business process, and they're used to doing it the way that they want to do it. So if I can get the effect I want without disturbing them and having to have a bunch of meetings and then have them go through everything and redo it all, I'd rather do that, because this feature class is updated every day. We get it from them. We build it from scratch. We get the table from them. We get the feature class from them. We merge it together. So if I can make the layer a little bit smarter and not have to do anything process-wise to disrupt what goes on at the property appraiser's office, I'm happy to do that.
And it also means
a little bit later,
by establishing your own dictionary there, you don't have to rely upon them actually publishing their domain. They may just be exporting it out as a simple feature class, maybe even a shapefile. And then you're just taking whatever you have. As long as you have that attribute, you can still look up and still search for this, correct?
Yeah. All we get from them is a DBF file.
Yep.
So we get a DBF file. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, if I can interject. I view Arcade as being value added. So if you do have a domain and if you don't like the values, or the values are not as explanatory as they could be, you could just value add it, the information you want with Arcade.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect explanation of it. And I'll try to show you that a little bit later if we have time. I've got one where I took a county commission district layer that the only thing it has in it for attributes is the district numbers. And the final pop-up has pictures of commissioners and links and population statistics. And it really, there's only one field in the attribute table, but everything else was built with Arcade.
So Ned, let me go and interject you one more time, because I want to explain something, because I know Nancy's sitting here and she's watching, and Nancy and I have had an ongoing discussion about data models and how to do it, and recognize that because of Arcade and because of these intersections, you no longer have to build as extensive a data model. You can have it set up so that in your overall application, you store these areas, these bits of information in disparate layers. And then you use Arcade to go and drill through and say, oh, this is actually located in this township, or this is located in this first division of this. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to store it in one single place. And Nancy, that's what I meant by that when we were having that discussion. So go ahead, sorry.
No, that's perfect. All right, so that leads me into this intersect function. And I wanted to show you, so let's click on one of these parcels. And this is our land information web map, and it's the one that you were showing it me before we kind of got started. This one actually goes through and looks at zoning and future land use, economic incentive areas, FEMA flood zones, all sorts of great information in here, even public school zones, which zone it's in. And one of the nice things about this is if I go to a parcel that I know is in multiple zoning districts, so let's turn on the zoning layer here. I know up here near the lake, I have a couple of parcels that straddle a zoning district properly. And if you look, this thing has the ability for me to put in however many intersects it hits. So there were a few people when I started doing this that were just putting in the response, well, if it equals more than one, put in an explanation to call the planning department because there are multiple zoning districts. In this instance, I always have that message at the bottom of this pop up for them to call the planning department before they make any land use decisions. But this, now they know it's in lake protection and in R3 single family detached. And I want to show you how that works in the parcel layer here. Let me go down to the bottom. There we go. So let's look at zoning information. So once again, I'm doing a negative 10-foot buffer on the parcel.
By the way, Ned,
And
just sort of as a follow-up on that, when you're doing intersections, you got to make sure that your parcels are at least 10 foot wide. I've actually used this same
Yes.
functionality, and you got to make sure that that buffer you put doesn't go and collapse itself, or you'll wind up getting errors. So we've had to reduce that on some of the times that we've used it.
Yeah, I ran into a few like that too, and I still haven't figured that out completely. I'm trying to get the zoning folks to do a better job matching up
Yeah.
their boundaries, but you always seem to end up with slivers, and you don't want to turn false information based on a sliver. So, but in this one, I shortened it up a little bit at the top here, but you can see I'm still doing a variable called intersect zoning, and I'm doing an intersect buffer of 10 feet on a feature by name from the map. So it's doing, here's $ feature, this feature I've selected. Here is the name of the feature in the map. And you should also know that over here, you can pull out all these things. So if I want to look at map and see all the layers in the stack, it will help me build this this expression if I need help building it. But what I've done here is this, if, let's see, do a variable for intersect, this plus equals down here at the bottom.
Yep.
Actually will, if there are, so the first one captures the first intersect. The second one captures any intersect after that. So it allows for additional. So that's what this plus equals does. And so what I do is do a text format to add a new, if the else is true, I add a new line, do an and then I do the feature zoning attribute and plus the feature zoning description. And that's what gives you that effect. And it will do it if there are 3 intersecting zoning districts. It'll just stack them out with ands in between them. And that's a real nice effect. It keeps me from having to do, you know, something where I kind of punk out and say, call the planning department. A similar thing here with the soil layer. So back in that natural features inventory that we were working on, we go back here to parcels awesome and look at the soil layer. It's doing a similar thing, except in this one I did a dotted line instead of and it's grabbing the soil name, so it's only one thing. So if I click one of these guys.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to comment that plus equals is actually the incrementer within Arcade, and that was some of the first things I was showing you about that. Yeah. Yep.
Yes. And the next one is the count function. And so, you know, when we were developing our new website, we killed an application that was fire hydrants, and we never really thought people were using it. It displayed locations of fire hydrants, and boy, did we hear about it when the application disappeared. And we built one really quick, stood it up, and while we were building it, we thought, hey, what if we could do better than just show you where they are? What if we could do how many hydrants and what proximity are they to this parcel? So here we're doing a 100-foot buffer, a 500-foot buffer, and a 1,000-foot buffer, and giving you a count within that buffer. And I can show you real quick. This is on parcel.
There you go.
So 100-foot buffer, how many are within 100 feet? Return the count. Similarly, you can use it for a yes, no. Back to this layer. So if you click on one of these guys and you go down to the zoning information, or not zoning, but the FEMA information, you can just see that zone A is present. So here, you can see that I've got an expression built for each type of zoning district. So if the count is less than 1, do nothing. If the count is greater than 1, show present. And in the HTML side, I make that present appear in red instead of green. If it's not present, or if it's not there, it just defaults to not present. There you go. All right, let's see. And I wanted to show a conditional here. This conditional is for the zoning layer, and it is in the zoning layer, whether the zoning layer is present in the map or not. I don't know if that makes sense. So if I click on this, you see this right here? And this is what Dan was talking about before, where it's enhanced information. The real information behind this is city, county, or both. But instead of that, we wanted to give them information on who to call based on where that zoning district is and whose responsibility it is. We could have done it as a decode, but this one I did as an else if else. So let's do configure pop up and take a quick look at that. Actually, it's not that layer. Let me get the right layer here. Zoning jurisdiction message. There you go. So if jurisdiction equals city, give this message. If jurisdiction equals county, give this one. Otherwise, it's multiple and give this message. And that is actually saved with the layer and the map image layer, so that anybody who adds this layer throughout our organization, either in Pro through ArcGIS Online or in a web map through ArcGIS Online, they get the pop-up that we've defined for it.
So Ned, one more question Nancy has. So when you update the parcel and zoning data, are the arcade expressions added to the updated features? And I think I can take this. No, the arcade expressions are stored in the map doc, in the web map, not necessarily in the features on this.
Right.
Correct?
Or there's three ways of doing this. One is it's stored with a registered feature layer. And when you update it, you're really only updating the content of the service. The service doesn't get re-registered. It's still at the same REST service URL. And so ArcGIS Online doesn't really know that anything's changed with the data content. It just knows it has this list of instructions in JSON that are required for this web map or for this feature layer or for the map service. I hope that clarifies that a little.
Yeah, and that's for on-premises servers, right?
Correct. You could do the same thing. You do the same thing for a feature layer in the cloud. If it's being updated by script, or if it's being updated by by staff using an application or from Pro, it really doesn't kill the JSON that already exists in the cloud. So long as you don't re-register it or change the registration on it,
Right.
it keeps that JSON and it's valid.
Okay.
So I've got a couple more things here. So let's look at some quick links here. You guys already looked at this page, but this quick intro to overlapping features. Come on now. Kelly Jarrow is brilliant. I have to harken back to my pre-arcade days. I was doing a little bit of arcade, but two of my office mates, Elizabeth and Dan, showed me this and said, you really ought to check this out. And reading this blog caused me to rewrite every production app we had to apply arcade expressions. So now instead of turning layers on and off to see what's out there, they're just getting an intersect feedback from the parser layer. And there are people sharing code in here. If you go down here, there's some people sharing code and instructions. This is worth reading almost everything in here because you'll see how, hey, look, there's a guy we know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. That is a brilliant, that post, I think, got most of us very excited about it. And she is brilliant. She really is. So one more question before you go any further on this. Ned, you have agreed to go and share this story map, right?
I have.
Yes. So can you give us a URL here or something that we can figure out how to get to this?
So let me
Just
copy.
put it in the chat window. Yep.
Trying to figure out where the chat window is on this.
It should be over on the side. If you look.
I've got everything minimized, so it could take me a minute here.
By the way, while you're doing that, it should be over in GoToMeeting. You see the link for where all the people, how many people are in there, and then there's another link right next to it. It's got like a chat window. You got it? Okay. While you're doing that,
yep, I got it.
Nancy, you were asking about, in fact, taking attribute rules, and you actually can. There is a function. Brian in our office just went and posted it over for me. A screenshot. There is a function where you can actually export and import in attribute rules into geodatabases. So that's another great option here. By the way, I think 3/4 of the people are now clicking on your link right now, Ned. So
that's fine. So here's the way this works. If you are a member of an ArcGIS Online org and you are logged into that org and you open this link, you will be able to save the web maps that are embedded into your own content. You'll still be pointing at our REST services and our JSON, but you'll be able to access all of the arcade expressions in each of the web maps. So by all means, copy away, use whatever you want. The majority of the arcade expressions I've written, I got from other people's code, because that's just how I work.
And I will confess, I've already copied some of yours already. So thank you for that. Great. Thank you for helping me with that. Yeah.
And Frank, just one more thing about attribute rules.
Yes, sir.
If you implement them in the geodatabase, you no longer have the ability to edit with ArcMap. So there's something that gets enabled in the geodatabase. Once you implement the rules, it will only work with Pro and ArcGIS Enterprise.
Thank you for reminding us of that, because there are some things that once you do them in ArcGIS Pro, you can't go backwards, and that's one of them. If you implement them inside of Pro, you can only use that geodatabase in Pro. You can't use it. Thank you for reminding me of that, Dan. Yeah.
So,
but then I'm gonna be smart and say, why would you ever want to go back to ArcMap, right?
This is true.
All right, go ahead, Ned. Sorry.
So one of my next tasks, so in our enterprise database where we share data for our desktop top users throughout the city and county, I think we probably have 600 or more desktop GIS users. If they are using ArcGIS Pro, I can create layer files for our local data that have the same arcade expressions built into them. So that if they add the zoning layer from my layer file, they get my pop-up. They get a zoning pop-up that tells them which jurisdiction they're in, who to contact, and we'll give them, if they open a PUD, it'll give them a link to the PUD documentation for that particular PUD, and it will give them a definition of the zoning district that they click on, a link to the actual code ordinance on that zoning category. So I can do that with any layer now if I want to build better content for it.
That's amazing. I was not aware of that. So the layer files, so you're creating them out of your web map? Is that correct? Or how are you sharing those out?
No. So the layer file is actually pointing to a local geodatabase, or it could point to an SDE geodatabase. So long as they use a layer file, you can open up ArcPro, make a layer in ArcPro that uses that layer file or that feature class, and you can build the same sort of arcade expressions that you would build against a web layer.
Right. Perfect.
And you can save them out as a layer file, and that way, moving forward, our folks, we're trying to train a lot of our users to look at layer files instead of the raw data in the geodatabase. And that way, it takes care. As long as they're not an editor, they're just viewing data. They can all use the same type of connection. In this instance, it's a file geodatabase.
And you're right.
But,
the layer file not only stores, and I forgot about it. Why it's also storing the pop-up expression, but it's also storing any symbology that you may have set and any labeling functions that you may have set. Correct. Good. Brilliant.
So that's the next thing to do. So, the one thing you notice when you look at a zoning layer, one of the zoning layers that I might have shown, is that if you zoom out too far on it, it looks terrible. So if we go up to that zoning layer example here, and we turn on the zoning in this, it just looks terrible from the web. If you zoom out, it's just so much cluttery green goo.
Yeah.
Or you can try to just show a fill on it and make it partially transparent. But if you do it in ArcGIS Pro, you can vary the symbol based on the scale and narrow the green line based on zooming in or zooming out.
Right.
Just like you would do with streets.
Isn't that functionality coming to? Isn't that in the beta of the map viewer now? As far as the scale dependency on the symbology, I thought.
I'd have to look at that. I haven't gone that far.
I think I read that the other day. That symbology is now in the map viewer beta. That you can go and change that symbology. Awesome. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. So what else do you have to share? Yeah.
All right. So I was going to show one more thing here. Let's go to.
By the way, 148,000 credits.
I'm not in charge of that.
Yeah.
So here's my Leon County Commission District's feature layer. And you notice it's nicely branded. Everything looks nice. If I go into the visualization tab on this, or actually, let's go into the data tab, and you can see just how silly this thing is. That's all it knows. I know my district number, and that's it. If I go into visualization, and I click on one of these guys, I get a lovely picture of Jimbo Jackson and the 2 commissioners at large, and links to their websites, and population census from 2010, and a printable district map link. All that from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is all done with arcade expressions. So commissioner name, web page link, image link, population, and a district link. After that, it's all just formatting in HTML.
Amazing. Yep.
So, you know, they asked us to make a better commission map, and we could have had a meeting where we talked about who was going to maintain the URLs for all this stuff and which picture to use. And instead, I just went to their website and harvested a link to their photograph on the website. And I'm just using whatever they have as their default image. Don't they look marvelous?
Yeah, so that they have the responsibility of changing that image as they want.
Yep, and that just is using what the default is for the county website.
Perfect. So what are the
I thought that would be kind of interesting to show.
That is interesting. That is interesting. And you're right. It all becomes value add on here for this. Thomas comments that elected officials love to have their pictures shown. They do.
Yes, they do.
Yes. It's always about massaging those egos because they're the ones that have they control the budget. And I can say that because it's a recording and I can say that. So I know Ned and I were talking beforehand. One of the things that I'm asking him, because I haven't figured out how to do it yet, is on those intersects, not only do we want to know what it's intersecting, but what's the area of that's being intersected. And I'm hoping that soon I'll be able to go in and pick his brain a little bit more and figure out how to actually calculate the area that's being intersected, not just what's being intersected.
That's completely possible, and one of the guys that's doing that a lot, he's in the link here that I provided, down at the bottom here, Xander Baker. Let's see. I think this is him here. If you can find Xander Baker, there he is.
Yeah.
So this is by him. A lot of his stuff is in Spanish, but I've gotten pretty good at figuring out what he's saying when he calls a variable. You know, here he is calling variables in Spanish, but you know, a variable is a variable.
All right. The logic is all the same.
And he's got a couple, right? He's got a couple in here where he's doing that kind of thing, and he and Kelly are always open to answering questions also.
Great. Thank you.
That's the next thing I want to do. Actually, Scott and I were talking about that earlier today. We used to run a Python script anytime somebody walked in the door at the development department for the county, they would get a preliminary environmental assessment, which basically was a parcel based Python script that gave you measurements for every type of environmental thing that could be on your property.
Yep.
And provided a map for you. And they charged $100 for that. And that was probably the first thing I ever made with Python or Model Builder. And they've been using it for probably 16 years now. Yeah. But if we could do that on a map, if we could do that using arcade expressions, I think that would be very nice.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with those, having to define how many acres of wetlands on your property, how many acres in each individual zoning, what about flood zones, what about endangered species, all of those, you know, and doing intersects with NWIA and all of that. So yeah. It's a great use of arcade. I mean, arcade is one of those languages where it's like, it just keeps exploding and keep having more and more things that you can do with it. And I'm amazed by how much Esri has put in here. It truly is mind blowing. It really has. So what I'd like to do is open it up a little bit more and see what other questions we might have, especially for Ned. I'm not concerned about me, but for Ned, because we are coming up on about 10 minutes before the workshop's supposed to close. I am reminding everybody that after it closes, we're going to stop the recording. And I know I'm going to stick around. Ned, if you have any time, because it's still, a little,
Sure.
maybe you can stick around for our office hours, which is just we turn everybody's mic on and say, hey, let's talk about this some more. But we can do that. So do we have any other questions for Ned or anything else on Arcade on here? Anything else you'd like us to talk about on Arcade? I think this was a deep dive, but this is just sort of touching on the very top of what you can do with this. I've found very few limitations on what you can do and cannot do in Arcade.
Is the arcade expression language affected at all when new versions of the ArcGIS Pro software is released?
I haven't found that to be the case so far. I have found that they're doing enhancements,
Yes.
and
And
one of everything is intended to be backward compatible.
Yeah, I haven't seen where they've
I mean, it looks-
deprecated
I mean,
any functions. Sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
No, I think it's great, and it's a lot of work. I mean, there's a lot of really cool things in here. Personally, I think a lot of this should be core, but not have the user bear the brunt of the customization. It's a lot of investment in coding, which is fine. It's good, and particularly since you're sharing it, that's wonderful. But I always am concerned that people sink a lot of time into making their maps look really great and the code expressions, and then the next version comes out and, oh, yeah, did we mention that doesn't work anymore?
Yeah,
But as long,
I think that's always a concern.
go ahead, Ned.
Some of the things that I've been trying to work on are like using arcade expressions for symbology. And if you have a very large data set, if you're trying to symbolize on multiple fields, you can use arcade to do that. But once you get past a certain number, certain row count, the drawing becomes painful and slow. I think that's only in the current version of WebMap. I think that it's really enhanced in the beta WebMap that's out right now. So I'm anxious to see that go live and see what better things I can do in that. So if any of you have tried to symbolize on multiple fields, you know that one of them has to be a number. You can't do multiple fields that are text-based, and the only way around that is with arcade.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the other thing is that county level is one thing. I think when you get to state level, you find that when you have interpretive code, I mean, this is sort of like reminds me of the old basic programming from before y'all were born. It was just an interpretive language, which is what this is again. When you get into national census data and that sort of thing, that I mean, it's just too slow.
So it's hard to ask this as a question to everybody, but Frank, I'll ask you, have you looked at ArcGIS Online Assistant at all?
I have not.
And are you familiar with it?
I am not. What is it?
All right, this might blow your mind. So let's go look at one of these maps in ArcGIS Online Assistant.
Everybody close your eyes so you don't see his password.
Oh, it was hidden, don't worry.
All right.
All right, so this is my content. This is the root of my content. I'm logged in, and if I want to go look at, let's go to land information. Actually, I'm going to go all the way down. I'm going to go to the arcade maps that we've been looking at. Sorry, right here. They're all in this folder. Got to click the number here. There we go. So here they are in the stack, and I can tell it I want to view an items JSON. And then I can go and I can look at the, let's see, the natural features better pop-ups web map. So here on this side, Let me move this out of the way. Now you can see there first is the details page. Not a lot there. But now this is the data. This is the actual map stack in that map. And what you'll see when I get down to the bottom here, well, let me do a search real quick here. Control F for parcel. Didn't like that. All right, so here's the parcel layer. Parcel's awesome. That's the one we wanted to look at. And now if I go down this, you will start to see, once I get past all the regular parcel attributes, you will see the arcade expressions stacked out, 0 through 38. So that's the number that there are in here, okay? And here they all are one at a time. Here's expression 0. Here's expression 1, expression 2. You see, that's the really long one. That's got all of the
decodes,
all of the property use codes. And what's nice is, you know, if you get good with this stuff, this reading the JSON, you can copy and paste bits of code from one web map to another, from one layer to another. But you have to be very careful, because if you break something in here, it's broken forever and there's no getting it back. Just letting you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So by the way, that brings up a really good question, and thinking about it, and this is something I want to start talking about with office hours, because we're going to close down this recording here soon. I want to talk about whether or not GIS is migrating too far into the programming element and less in sort of the application usage, you know, the practitioner. And because there's a lot of amazing things going on the programming side. The question is there still a balance being created here with this? So anyway, I just wanted to preface that that's something I'd like to start talking about when we start,
right?
When we stop this recording. All right.
I did want to answer a question that just came up there, and that is do I archive my content? And yes, Aptana, the program I was talking about before, you can see here that I have tons. Anytime I do a really big arcade expression, this is where it's saved. So let's find that property use. Here's the property use arcade expression. And so from anytime I'm dealing with parcels and I want to use that expression, I just copy and paste it out of here into that. And I also do the same thing with the pop-ups that I create. So here's that Parnell layer, and I wanted to show you what it looks like to hit play in this. Save it, display it, there it is. This is just in a little Firefox window that I've got set up that it draws. Shows me what it looks like. And I'm starting to redo some of the formatting on these. I follow a couple of different people from Esri, but this one, let's see if I can find it. Hold on a second. There we go. Environmental easement and play. Oops, not that one. It's this one. This guy. Play. It should bring that on top. Not sure why it didn't. Hang on. There it is. So now I'm starting to put like this one has a little green line at the top, and rather than black, gray and white, I'm doing a little more like a spreadsheet look,
right? And
a div for any kind of warning about the information. It just looks a little bit cleaner. So I'm starting to redo some of these.
Perfect. Ned, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you. And like I said, I'm going to see if I can get you to agree to doing a story map deep dive, maybe even next month.
Sure.
And we'll talk
Okay.
about that more. So we'll see about that. So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording here. And
thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.